Wow. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. Appreciate everybody that's here. Missed you guys. Been like 2 days, huh? Huh. Yeah. So get back into it. Shout out to Eva Finn for the drop. She sent me this book a long time ago. I'm just now catching up to my emails, and I was like, wow, pretty interesting book. It got quick chapters, so I said, let's just get through it. Let's read it. And what attracted me the most about the book is the image which they had contained in the book, which you see here in the cover. All right, we're gonna take a look at that, and I'm gonna go ahead and see what this guy is saying in the book. Hope you guys enjoy the reading. All right, another Atlantis drop to add to the bucket. What's up, Nestor? Hey, man. Thanks for the support. Appreciate everybody. Um, always giving me the good comments and saying, hey, appreciate it, motivating me. So here I go, let's read some more. All right, 1 second. All right. So I guess right in the beginning of this book, it has this image right here. You guys recognize this place, right? So pretty interesting. Um, so this is a famous map of the Antillia or Antilles or Antillia. And this is how they usually draw it, something like this. So what the author, I guess, is saying is that Atlantis or Antillia is just like the eastern part of North America or USA. So you got the Susquehanna River on the top. You got the Ohio River right here, the Mississippi right over here, and the Atlantic Ocean, Florida sticking out, right? Down into Texas, Louisiana. Well, not Texas, right? It's Mississippi. So Louisiana, Mississippi. And he's saying Atlantis, right? Dwelling place of the gods. All right, that's the title of the book by Henriette Mertz. Okay. So again, this is the book we're going to be reading, Atlantis, Dwelling Place of the Gods by Henriette Mertz. All right. 1976, when he wrote this. All right, so we're going to go to chapter 1. And it says here, the enigma of the Bimini, or enigma of Bimini. If you guys don't know the Bimini Road, all right, just like, this off the coast of Bimini, they found these like stone, what looks to be like a road or megalithic stones, possibly could be even a building, in the ocean off the coast of Bimini. So we're definitely going to follow that up one day and do a thorough video on the Bimini as we gather the information more thoroughly, But it says here in chapter 1, when the gods divided up the whole earth, here into larger portions, there into smaller. Poseidon received as his allotment the island of Atlantis. Thereon dwelled one of the natives originally sprung from the earth. Alright? Originally sprung from the earth, the natives who came out of the earth. So if the oldest land is in the Americas, wouldn't it spring the oldest natives? Evanor by name, who lived in a cave on the side of a low mountain with his wife Lucipe and their only daughter, Cleito. When the lovely young damsel became of marriageable age and her mother and father having died, Poseidon being smitten with desire for her, wedded her. Of this union 5 pairs of twin sons were born, and after they had been reared up, Poseidon divided the island of Atlantis into 10 portions, given to the firstborn of the eldest pair, his mother's dwelling place, and him he appointed to be king over all the rest. He gave names to all, and to the eldest he gave the name Atlas, after which the whole island was named, and the sea spoken of as the Atlantic. Now remember, ATL is an Nahuatl. It's an American, word or phrase, dialect, language, right? A large family of distinguished sons sprang up from Atlas. But it was the eldest who, as king, always passed the scepter to the eldest of his sons. Each succeeding generation added to the beauty of the island, and the wealth they possessed surpassed anything known before. Thus, on the island of Atlantis, there now existed a confederation of kings of marvelous power, holding sway over all the island, as well as parts of the continent beyond, and many smaller islands that extended out into the sea. Then suddenly disaster struck. One grievous day and night befell them, when a catastrophic earthquake and flood swallowed up the island, and all the people vanished, washed away by the flood. Since that fated day, whereabouts of the fabled island of Atlantis has remained a mystery. This oft-told story came about during one of Plato's discourses, when Critias related the tale to an assembled group as it had been told to his grandfather, Critias the elder, a descendant of the brother of Solon. Solon, one of the great statesmen of Greece, having laid the foundation for a constitutional democracy, and believing that his reforms would work better if he were absent, left Athens and traveled for 10 years, partly for business reasons, but more probably from a sense of curiosity to see strange places and meet interesting people. During the course of his wanderings, he spent considerable time in Egypt, all right? So-called Egypt, right? The true Egypt, Kameri, all right? Don't get lost. And while at Sais on the Nile Delta, he met Sonchis, the Nile Delta, Mississippi. On the Mississippi Delta, the Great River. Nile means Great River in Greek, and Mississippi means Great River in Algonquin and Ojibwe, if you don't know. So he met Sanchez there, right? At the Great River's Delta, one of the priests of the goddess Neith. Sanchez related the story to Solon as it had been preserved in the hieroglyphics, and so it is from Solon's sojourn in Egypt that the story of Atlantis has come down to us. Skeptics scoff at Plato's story, dismissing it as nothing more than figment. All right, sorry, I had a call. So the skeptics say it's a figment of his imagination, Plato. Whimsy, fantasy, a dream of an utopian city dwelling place of the gods. Yet during the telling of this ancient tale, Critias 4 times assured us that it was true, even though he said the size of the island and its many features were so large he had difficulty in believing it himself, but he felt duty bound to report what he was told, all right? So again, that's one thing about the description of Atlantis is the size, so large. We're not just talking about a little island or a little colony in North Africa. They would have known it was there if we were talking about North Africa. All right, so to which Socrates replied that the fact that the story was no invented fable, but genuine history, was all important. They were talking about America the whole time. If the story be true, an island in the western Atlantic of considerable magnitude and incredible beauty must have been known to ancient peoples. Homer's description of Scetia, the land across the sea where Odysseus, found himself, corresponds in detail to Plato's account, as does the lengthy description of Diodorus Siculus. Plato, Homer, and Diodorus all stress ideal living conditions, all right, a paradise, an ideal uh, a place where conditions of living are great, delightful climate, all right, clear spring water, luscious fruits, picturesque scenery, a bountiful land. Yes, that's we're talking about America. Plato's story originated in Egypt. Yeah, in America, around 600 BC. All right, in your uh, false chronologies, right? Phantasm duplicates, right? Homer's in Greece about 800 BC, and Diodorus Siculus in Carthage about the turn of the Christian era. All right, where was the real Carthage? Three accounts unrelated in time and place describing a fabulous land far across the sea may be coincidental, but again, they may not be. So, again, remember, guys, yeah, parts of it underwater, devastation, some cataclysms, floods, but not all of it went down. A lot of it's still here. We're still here. So a lot of these stories coming out of Egypt, yeah, that part was up still. Mississippi, all that part was still up, right? Hadn't gone down. A certain mystique surrounds the Western Atlantic. Whatever may have happened in some past geologic age, this area, unlike other areas of the globe, presents geologists with an unsolved jigsaw puzzle in which pieces either do not fit or are missing. Here, 3 or 4 thousand years ago, water suddenly rose 30 feet, covering an extensive tract of land, the now submerged Grand Bahama Bank, while at the same time, land north of the St. Lawrence rose. Here, the Atlantic reaches its lowest depth of 28,374 feet at the Puerto Rico Trench. Here, in early days, that vast expanse of floating seaweed, the Sargasso Sea, sent one becalmed sailing ship after another to the bottom, snarled amongst the weeds, unable to extricate itself. Here, in this region from Florida, along the West Indies and north to Bermuda, known today as the Bermuda Triangle, ships and planes have suddenly disappeared, leaving no trace. Strange and unpredictable events occur with uneasy regularity within these waters, a bizarreness of breathless waiting for the next thing to happen. And happen it did. Late in 1968, electrifying news flashed around the globe that Atlantis had been found. First excited dispatches reported ruins of a large temple that had been sighted from the air submerged in shallow water on the Grand Bahama Bank. Not alone, one temple, but scores of other buildings. Many of the first reports were fabrications, and the almost instant excitement that captured public imagination soon was tempered by sober announcements that these underwater structures were nothing more than old turtle pens, neither ancient nor man made. As this controversy got underway, it was found that turtles never lived in pens, so another answer must be forthcoming, all right? So they debunked that. Submerged ruins in this region had first been reported by fishermen in the early 1920s, but little attention had been paid to them, and the incidents passed without undue concern. In the summer of 1957, Dr. William Bell sighted and photographed what he described as a spear-like form rising from 6 feet above the ocean bed, protruding from what appeared to be a double cogwheel. In 1967, a pilot, while flying low over the Bahamas, reported seeing a large stone structure, which he believed to be of human construction. Dr. J. Manson Valentin, honorary curator of the Science Museum in Miami, cited several unusual geometrical configurations on the ocean floor in the area between Bimini and Andros, but before he had time to examine the area most closely, shifting sands carried by underwater currents of the Gulf Stream covered the structures. It was not until the summer of 1968 that Valentin was able to explore the ocean floor. At that time, he discovered a building complex measuring approximately 100 by 60 is that feet, yeah, which he believed to have been man-made. A few weeks later, on 2nd of September 1968, Valentine, diving in 3 fathoms of water off the northwest coast of Bimini, made his most amazing discovery. An extensive pavement of rectangular stone blocks, accurately aligned, formed a perfect mosaic walkway stretching in a straight line for some 3/4 of a mile, flushed with the thrill that accompanies discovery. And no longer able to keep it a secret, Valentine disclosed his astonishing find to the press. Atlantis had been found. Atlantis had been found. All right, so real quick, we're gonna go. All right, let me just. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate everybody that's here. We live. All right, and we're gonna put the Bimini Road. Right, we don't even need to put Atlantis. We're gonna go to images. So, guys, this is what they're talking about. There's literally structures down there where it seems to be aligned, man-made stuff. The Bimini Road. All right. So you guys can get an idea what they're talking about. Because here's a good one. So it seems to like go off even from the land and it goes into the water. All right. So they're calling it a road, but it could be something else. It just, appears like a road. So here we go. You guys see that? Interesting, huh? The Bimini Road. Just so you guys can get an idea. Oh, here's a good one. So it goes into like, yeah. And then look at this right angle, like how it turns. Some scattered stones. All right. Where could Atlantis really be? It says here. There goes the road. Pretty crazy how people dive in there. All right, so here goes another one. All right. So here they have a drawing in the book. So we got some submerged building. It says, okay, so this is like a building, and this is not part of the road. All right. So it says, with such an astounding announcement by the mass media, thousands of the curious converged on the Bahamas by ship and plane, few realizing the significance of what they came to see. Divers went down, and soon a dozen or more complex stone structures were reported over a 70-mile area between the islands of Andros and Bimini. 12 large stone structures, temples or palaces, one of which was hexagonal buildings with walls 3 feet thick, a circle of 40 marble pillars standing upright in what might have been a temple courtyard. Okay, this is what they're finding here: a cache of cylindrical objects of cement, amongst which were 2 flooded marble columns. Before too long, the Bahama government registered concern with no much ill-conceived activity and wishing to protect and preserve whatever this submerged material might later be found to represent, took measures to stop widespread destruction and removal, issuing orders against unauthorized diving. So then the government got involved. You see, they were like, no more diving. North Bimini, the larger of the cluster of islets, is 7 miles long and a few hundred feet wide, hardly comparable to the Atlantis that Plato described. All right. Of course, because it's the whole Americas. Some 700 acres of land were owned by North American Rockwell, a company active in the space program, huh? In the space program. Why would they own this? At the time of these submerged ruins were reported, this company was in the process of developing the island under contract with the Bahama government. Question arose concerning possible age of the ruins, and while both the company and the government recognized the highly controversial nature of the situation, neither wished to be carried away by any romanticism or mystique surrounding the question of Atlantis. However, should evidence prove these submerged features to be of human construction, the company had no alternative but to proceed with development accordingly. Two different approaches lent themselves to scientific study. The cylindrical objects of cement could be analyzed to determine probable age of the material, and the line of parallel blocks which Valentine had discovered might provide an answer as to whether it was of human construction. The first problem was given to Professor Wyman Harrison, a licensed geologist, and the second problem turned over to the University of Miami School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences, Division of Marine Geology and Geophysics. Both rendered negative reports. First, the cement was less than 150 years old, and second, the line of blocks was common beach rock. That's what they said, right? These two reports provide a classic example of how evidence is interpreted and how our knowledge of history is shaped. One of the cylindrical cement objects was brought to the surface and opened for examination. Harrison submitted the first sample to Professor Ronald Perkins of Duke University. All right, so here's a image on the next page. All right, I guess you see the U.S., Florida right here. And it says a Gulf Stream, or Plate 2 Gulf Stream of Florida taken from satellite photo. All right. So we're talking to Professor Ronald Perkins of Duke University, the first sample that was sent, whose analysis indicated that the substance was not limestone. He associated the material with volcanic matter and speculated that pozzolan might have been involved. This type of cement is the oldest known of hydraulic mortars, dating back to Greek and Phoenician times. It is formed by incorporating volcanic tufa with slated lime and sand, which hardens on contact with water. You hear that, guys? Creating concrete. Sounds like almost geopolymer. Harrison next sent samples to Portland Cement Company of Skokie, Illinois, to Master Builders of Cleveland, and to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Portland Cement submitted the sample for analysis to their laboratory technician, but they were unable to determine the origin of the cement, replying that they did not have answers to the questions as to where the material had been made or at what period of time. The vice president of Master Builders, in charge of research, replied that he was not aware of this type of cement and that he could neither speculate on its source nor date it. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers report was missing. Harrison, in his formal report to North American Rockwell, after charging Valentine with wishful thinking, calling his statements unscientific, either false or a misrepresentation, pointed out that literally scores of ships floundered in the Bahamas during storm over the past several hundred years, and these cement objects had probably been offboarded to lighten the ship's ballast. All right, so he's guessing probably somebody threw them in there. Well, it's not that quite. He called special attention to the distinguished background of both Portland Cement and Master Builders, to whom he had referred the samples, implying that his report resulted from their findings. His report then stated that the material seems to be a hydrated natural cement, probably less than 150 years old. He made no mention of Perkins' analysis or that neither Portland Cement nor Master Builders had recognized the substance and were unable to date the cement. It therefore follows that any date as recent as 150 years ago appears to have been wishful thinking on the part of Harrison himself. No analysis by Dr. Perkins, Portland Cement, or Master Builders supported this date. Quite the contrary appears to be true. In describing the cylindrical object, Harrison noted that the cement had been poured dry into wooden barrels and hardened on contact with water, the barrels having long since disintegrated, acted as a mold, and given shape of the wooden barrels. Harrison placed the normal center bulge strangely off center and reported 2-inch variation between top and bottom circumference. Again, if the dry cement hardened within wooden barrels on contact with water, staves which formed the barrel would normally leave a ridge running from top to bottom at the joint, but no such ridge appears. The surface is smooth. If, on the other hand, as Perkins observed, the substance might well be an ancient pozzolan cement, then the containers could well have been the ancient Greek pitoi, ceramic jar having a normal off-center bulge, top and bottom circumference, unequal, and a smooth interior. Pitoi were the common receptacles used throughout the Mediterranean world as both storage jars and containers for transporting any and all types of commodities. Hey, much love and appreciation, Shermanator. Thank you. The paramount issue, however, concerned the long mosaic line of blocks, which Valentine had reported, having been dismissed as turtle pens. Was the wall or walkway of human construction, or was it a natural formation that merely resembled something man might have put together? John Gifford, then a graduate student in the Division of Marine Geology, University of Miami, was given the assignment to determine whether or not the stone blocks were fitted together as separate and individual blocks and so of human construction, or whether what looked like a long line of blocks might in fact be nothing more than beach rock that nature had fragmented into pieces. If his study proved the blocks to be individual and separate, such findings would have tremendous impact, since these ruins would then represent the work of an unknown civilization in our very front yard, a matter unacceptable to present teaching. However, should his study find the blocks to be beach rock, no problem would arise, for beach rock was common to the area. Beach rock is a natural formation built up by winds whipping sand into swirls, which in turn intermingle with spray from the surf and solidify along the shoreline. In his first report, Gifford found the mosaic pattern of the blocks to be something of a geological enigma. All right, there's a geologist saying this. His survey indicated that they were individual blocks resting on underlying bedrock. So they weren't part of the bedrock, which showed no fracture but was smooth. That none of the evidence conclusively disproved human intervention. All right, and the blocks did not resemble any kind of beach rock. All right, geologist telling you this again. You saw his credentials, right? University of Miami. All right, he was the graduate student of the Division of Marine Geology. From that university, he's letting you know it's smooth, it's not cracked, whatever they're saying, beach rock, bedrock, none of that. All right, debunked. None of the evidence conclusively disproved human intervention, and the blocks did not resemble any kind of beach rock. Such a finding was unthinkable. In his second report, some 20 months later, however, Gifford apparently had a change of mind without indicating any reason for doing so. All right, they pressured him maybe? This time he relied on negative evidence, something he looked for but did not find. Tool marks. Sorry, guys. Had to cough. All right, so tool marks he was looking for. Let me see. On the stones. So he was looking for tool marks on the stones, he's saying. Why tool marks should be a criterion is not clear. He apparently overlooked the fact that ancient workers in stone, being highly skilled craftsmen, left no telltale tool marks. But even had they done so, constant movement of the water, together with abrasive action of sand, long since would have polished off any tool marks. Gifford's real struggle came when he tried to explain the mosaic pattern by relating it to the manner in which nature fragmented beach rock, but he found no such simple answer. It was here that he placed himself in a dilemma, believing, on the one hand, that the continuous line of block had been fragmented by nature but unable to account for known beach rock in the immediate vicinity that was neither split into blocks nor even cracked. So he couldn't prove what he was trying to theorize. Yet he was firmly convinced that in some future day, geologists may provide an answer. He said, well, maybe somebody will figure it out later on, because I couldn't. So here's a line of stone rocks. They're drawing here. There's Bimini, North Bimini. Because this was the crucial issue. And after 3 years of wrestling with the problem, Gifford could not bring himself to face it head on. Instead, he bowed out. The large building structures between Andros and Bimini had not been studied, having no alternative. North American Rockwell, based on these two inconclusive or negative reports, finally gave up and terminated their contract with the Bahama government. Okay? So ended the once hopeful development of this lovely island, paradise of Bimini. And so also was squashed any thought of an ancient civilization submerged on the Grand Bahama Bank. All right, so I don't know why they couldn't still develop the island, but you see how that went hand in hand. All right. This is not real. Okay. Thanks, moderators. Appreciate you guys. Scientific interest in these submerged ruins remained very much alive in other parts of the world, being intrigued with persistent conflicting reports. A French group of scientists under the aegis of the Sorbonne, to satisfy their own curiosity, decided to send one of their top marine geologists, Pierre de Latin, to Bimini, not to look for an explanation, but to see what there was to be explained. His report, in spite of its highly technical nature, fairly bristled with excitement as he related astonishment of what he saw. Okay? Another geologist. He spoke of contradictory opinions published in scientific journals, which had led the French group to speculate that possibility did exist that these submerged ruins might involve archaeology, that they were man-made. However, should they prove to have been formed by nature, such a phenomenon would be a geological enigma without parallel in the world, and they therefore wanted to look at it. Before leaving France, the Latil was more or less persuaded in his own mind that possibility existed of a valid natural formation, and he fully expected to confirm the geological formation at the site. His fascination with the problem was apparent as he examined one feature after another, while his questioned mind did a slow right about face, shifting most reluctantly from a natural formation and the geological solution to a man-made construction, an archaeological one. All right, he found the blocks independent, one from another, fitted perfectly together as a mosaic, not as a fracture split apart by nature. All right, this is a geologist from France. He says that is not natural. This was the problem Gifford struggled with, but failed to resolve. De Latil, in concluding his report, stated, "We returned from the Bahamas as believers in the archaeological solution." Our story started with Plato, tale of a large island at a distant point in the Atlantic Ocean that suddenly disappeared 4 times. Critias assured us that the tale was true and historical fact. As we were in the midst of studying the question to determine as best we could whether the story might be fact or fiction, these unexpected ruins were reported in the very region where Plato placed Atlantis. We felt that we would be remiss if we failed to set forth this highly controversial matter, since possibility did exist that it may shed some light on this ancient legend. In the following chapters, we shall step back in time from the known to the unknown to determine whether or not, in some manner, knowledge of this region may be traced back to an ancient day and so back to Plato. Historically, our first acquaintance with these troubled waters stems from the landfall of Columbus, right? So-called Columbus. Salvador Fernandez Sarco. Check out my video on that. On the island of San Salvador, in the easternmost chain of the Bahama archipelago. All right, why did he go to the Bahamas? Interesting. What a coincidence, right? Right where Bimini was, right? Following Columbus came such well-known explorers as Ponce de Leon, discoverer of Florida. All right, they didn't discover anything. All right, you can't discover a place where there was already people. That makes no sense. Be logical. All right. So, so-called discoverer of Florida, who became the first governor of Bimini. So Ponce de Leon, remember he was into that whole mythology, looking for the Fountain of Youth and all that, and he actually was the first governor of Bimini. Columbus landed in over there in Bahama. What a coincidence, huh? Narvaez and his disastrous expedition along the Gulf Coast, ending with the incredible trek of Cabeza de Vaca. Shortly thereafter came Hernando DeSoto, whose infamous expedition was first to encircle the interior of southeastern United States, and it is his path we shall follow. All right, you guys ready? We're gonna go into chapter 2. Hope you guys enjoying the reading so far. We'll take a little water break. Chapter 2. The DeSoto Expedition. How much information did Columbus have before he set sail from Spain? Did he know beforehand that islands existed in the far western Atlantic? Did he possess maps and charts of this region as Piri Reis indicated? Remember, the Piri Reis Map was showing America all the way from the north to the south, even at Antarctica. Even Antarctica with no ice. It was the Piri Reis basically seems to be a copy of an ancient map. Okay? Let me know if the music is too loud, guys. I can't tell on my end, so let me know if it's too loud or whatever. From early childhood, we were taught that Columbus was first to cross that vast expanse of open ocean, that impenetrable sea of darkness, full of frightening monsters. But was he first? If he were not first, were the Norsemen men first? Was Columbus himself not a member of the expedition that had reached Canada sometime around 1477? All right, so was it his first time? That's a drop right there. We know Columbus met Indians in Ireland. Remember that drop, so-called Columbus. But we know definitely Norsemen or people from Europe were going back and forth from here. In ancient times, there was trade, people going that way. Remember the current, the ocean currents bring you over there. From the Caribbean, up all the way to the north, the Arctic region, and down into the Ireland, the British Isles. So, yeah, that was happening. Had he not been in Iceland previously, all right, was Columbus really, was that his first time there? Really? Where knowledge of Greenland and land to the west had been known for centuries, all right? Yep, they knew about Greenland because there's a lot of the founders in Norway and a lot of these northern towns in Europe actually were people coming from Greenland or North America. They founded those places and their town is named after them. I got a future video on that. I'm going to show you what I mean. I'm not making this up. He came on a kayak, the kayaks they made in Greenland, the native people there. How many sailors had reached our shores since time immemorial but left no record? All right, so again, they're seeing all this in reverse. Again, this is Atlantis, so we went from here first. Inscribed stones recently found in Maine and Quebec tell us that men from Carthage were here. All right, now he's talking about the inscriptions we've been learning about, right? The Iberian, Paleo-Hebrew, Punic, all right, script. They find it all over the Americas, but in this case, they're telling you in Maine and Quebec, huh? Near the oldest land of the world, right? Where all this fossil, all this water, all this forest. Remember the oldest trees all around this area. Herodotus noted that Phoenician and Greek merchantmen sailed beyond the pillars on expeditions in search of sources of raw materials, copper, spices, fine woods, tin, frequently taking 3 years for a return voyage. All right, so we know the purest copper is right here. After the fall of Carthage, the Strait of Gibraltar was closed to ships. Then came a period known as the Dark Ages, dodged the hijack, with their chronologies adding phantasm duplicates, creating these Dark Ages. Really? When Europe went through these deep depression, intensely bitter cold winters, devastating bubonic plague, famine, and revolt of the lower classes, they want to think you this dark time where they couldn't keep record. There's no record, guys. You understand? They haven't found stuff from those times. That's why it's called the Dark Ages. They made it up and rewrote history and created false chronologies. In the Mediterranean area, early in the 8th century AD, Moors crossed over from Africa. That's the hijack that they were. Were they really all from Africa? Into southern Spain, carrying on almost continuous warfare over the next 700 years. After prolonged siege on January 1492, Granada fell and the last stronghold of the Moors was recaptured. So again, they just said they were there creating war. No, they weren't. They actually created civilization. The Moors and the Sephardic Jews that were in the Iberian Peninsula, not necessarily all of them coming from Africa. All right. So a lot of these people, based on what they're telling us, they go back to, like, Phoenicians and Etruscans and all these other ancient people seem to have been coming from Atlantis. So what do you mean they were coming from Africa? Where's Atlantis? You yourself are saying it in this book. We're gonna see. So starts to hijack a lot of the generalized info. Remember, this is a book from the 70s. Shout out to the author for writing his book in the 70s, sharing this with everybody. So when Granada fell in 1492, right? Same year Columbus and them, right? Same year Columbus and them, right? Came over here supposedly and discovered something. Granada fell and the last stronghold of the Moors was recaptured. In the late summer of that same year, Columbus sailed out from Palos, right? Same year. What a coincidence. The Catholics take over and Columbus has to leave. Who's Columbus then? I'm telling you right there. Who's Columbus and his cruise ship? While Columbus represents the last of a long line of ancient Mediterranean seamen who had crossed that sea of darkness, yet he must be conceded first of modern explorers to open Atlantic seaways to an outpouring of intrepid navigators who followed. During the 14th and 15th and 16th century, nautical charts of the Atlantic circulated freely in countries bordering the Mediterranean. Columbus was familiar with them, as were Ponce de Leon and DeSoto. They were common property. These nautical charts, to be discussed more fully in the following chapter, depicted a large island in the western Atlantic identified as Antillia. And it was this very island that Columbus sought. Remember, Columbus looking for the Antilles, that the mythical Antilles. Grants had been offered by the Portuguese government as early as 1452 to any of their subjects who would discover islands in the western Atlantis, all right? Because Columbus was what? He was Portuguese. Who they granted him to? Portuguese. Columbus was a Portuguese Jew. His real name was Salvador Fernandes Tarco, related related to Henry the Navigator. That was his granduncle. You guys don't remember. Starting in 1475, grants were awarded with specific instructions to find Antillia, the fabled island of the seven cities. According to his son Fernando, Columbus well knew of this legendary island, having earlier applied to the Portuguese for a grant, which he failed to get, and it was this island that he sought when he left Spain. While Columbus did not reach Antillia, his first landfall occurred at San Salvador, due east of Bimini, and the Bahama archipelago, where he had presumed Antillia to be. Following on the heels of Columbus, scores of mariners under both Spanish and Portuguese flags sailed into these waters. One of particular interest was that of Pamphilo de Narvaez, which set out so hopefully from Cuba in 1528 to find the island of seven cities of Antillia, the seven cities of gold. Oh, those were the same as the seven cities of Antillia, huh? Cities of gold. Shout out to Drop. And which met which one disaster after another. Having been blown off course, Narvaez landed his men just south of Tampa on the Florida Gulf Coast on 14th of April, 1528. Not knowing where he was, he divided his group into two sections, sending his ships along the coast to locate suitable harbors, while his land forces proceeded on foot or on horse. He failed to connect with his ships, and after months of aimless wandering, lack of proper food, wallowing in swampy marshlands, passing through hostile territory, battling the elements in a backwater wilderness, Narvaez and his emaciated men eventually found their way to Anhaica, Appalachia. Okay, we've read this before, on the north coast just south of present-day Tallahassee, a harbor known today as Appalachia Bay. Having by now killed his horses for food and their dogs, remember, they killed their dogs they had. Their war dogs, remember the war dogs they brought? And they were using to kill Indians and sick them after them. And yeah, eventually they got so hungry they ate their war dogs too. They left this part out. We read it. And being no longer able to proceed by land, Narvaez constructed 5 ships which he hoped would carry him along the coast, eventually to Mexico. 4 ships were lost during storm, including that of Narvaez. The 5th, under command of Cabeza de Vaca, was wrecked off the Texas coast near present Matagordo Bay. A long chain of disastrous events stemming from this wreckage eventually ended with the ill-fated expedition of Coronado. Alright, we're gonna get more into this story. Shout out to Drab again, he's gone over it a lot. And it involves Stebanico and all these people, right? But it's gonna mention it here a little bit. The incredible trek of Cabeza de Vaca, groping his uncertain way westward, reads like some horrendous nightmare. After years of wandering, he reached Mexico City in July of 1536, having as his sole companion the slave Estebanico, the Moor from Morocco, who the Indians didn't like. And you're gonna see what they're probably gonna mention what happened to him. On his return to Spain, Cabeza de Vaca, to make his story of agonized suffering even more fantastic than it actually was, told exaggerated tales of those 7 cities of Antillia, which in fact he never saw. 2 years after Cabeza de Vaca left for Spain, the slave Esteban, with considerable self-assurance, contributed to the already charged atmosphere by organizing an expedition of his own with the help of the Franciscan Friar Marcos, alright, Denisa. Hey, so remember, this is Esteban's expedition. They always tell it in reverse, like he's following Marcos, like he's Marcos' slave. This is Estebanico's expedition. He's like, hey, wait, I don't want to leave yet. Nah, I got unfinished business here. Alright, so setting out from Mexico City, Esteban and his small party wandered around northern Mexico into Arizona, into Arizona state of bewilderment, committing inexcusable acts. Listen to what's going on. He was doing bad stuff, inexcusable acts. The Moor from Morocco, Estebanico, of violence which eventually led to his murder. The Indians had enough with him and they got rid of him. They murdered him. Yes, that's the story of Estebanico, the Moroccan Moor in America. After Esteban's death, his companions fled carrying word back to Marcos that Esteban had found the seven cities of Cibola. No such cities existed. Dodge the hijack. Oh yeah, they pretty real. However, Marcos passed the word Cibola on to Mexico, which in turn led to the ill-contrived Coronado expedition. Since that time, historians have unfailingly confused the seven cities of Antillia with the non-existent seven cities of Cibola, the number seven being common to both. Following the wake of Cabeza de Vaca, the first to explore the interior of southeastern United States was Hernando DeSoto, who landed on the west coast of Florida on 18 of May 1539, 11 years after Narvaez and Cabeza de Vaca. Because DeSoto's expedition, diabolical though it was, and carving as it did, an unbroken trail of scorched earth, ravaged by fire and sword, yet is of singular importance to us, since he was first of the Europeans of whom we have record whose reconnaissance into this region is of special interest to our story. First, the area which he encircled encompassed the Blue Ridge, the Cumberlands, the Great Smokies, and the Alleghenies, the extent of the Appalachian chain, and second, place names of towns and villages through which he passed, many of which remain and have significance today. Hernando de Soto was a man of considerable wealth and experience, having served as lieutenant general under Pizarro in the conquest of Peru, and at the time of this expedition he was serving as governor of Cuba. So basically, he was there when they murdered Atahualpa, the conquest of Peru. He carried with him the equivalent of 100,000 pesos in gold as his share of the plundered wealth of the Inca. They took everything. With this background of exploration, he coveted still greater wealth, hoping to find it somewhere in the north of Florida, where stories circulated by Cabeza de Vaca told of wealth of this newly discovered region, of a fabulous place or palace, and streets paved with gold. And here to the heart of Appalachia De Soto came, all right? This is what he was hearing. While the precise route De Soto followed remains debatable, yet the general path can be traced partly by names of towns through which he passed and partly by minute descriptions of geographical phenomena recorded by the Fidalgo of Elvas and by Rangel De Soto's private secretary, both of whom kept fairly accurate records of day-to-day events. Many place names which we find noted in these diaries still exist, corrupted in some instances, but yet recognizable. Since these names were set down on the spot at that time, they therefore would have been in existence at that place before the coming of De Soto. Alright? Before De Soto, he didn't name them. Spelling may be changed due to the language variation, where sounds may be reduced differently by two individuals setting the word down phonetically. However, in spite of these corruptions, many place names which the Fidalgo of Elvas or Rangel recorded still exist and can be located. After landing in Florida, at or near Tampa Bay, the expedition headed north, crossing a great marshland, and arrived at a major town named Cali. Cali. According to the final report of the United States DeSoto Expedition Commission, a commission appointed for the purpose of tracing DeSoto's route, the Cali of DeSoto's is our present-day town of Ocala. Proceeding north, then west from Cali, after a considerable number of days' journey, Elvis noted another important town by the name of Axil, which according to the commission is present-day Auxila. All right, that was an indigenous name. You guys hear that? Some 25 miles due east of Tallahassee, a place name phonetically equivalent and with only a slight variation in spelling. Due west of Tallahassee, the party interrupted their journey for several days' rest at the town of Calahoochee, present-day Chattahoochee. From Calahoochee, DeSoto set out for Anhaica, Appalachia. an area made known to him from the earlier expedition of Narvaez and Cabeza de Vaca. Here it will be noted from the journal of the Fidalgo of Elvas that Apalache was the seat of a powerful chieftain to whom the entire region owed allegiance. That Appalachia was of considerable importance before DeSoto's arrival, there can be little doubt. The name Appalachia extends back into antiquity, but how far back no one presently knows, for it was there before Cabeza de Vaca and likewise before DeSoto. All right, so shout out to Warchief Red Lion. He knows how ancient that word Appalachia is and its connection to South America. After an extended stay in Anhaica, Appalachia, the exploring party ascended the Appalachian River, following the eastern tributary and traveled north on the Flint River, reaching a point some 30 miles or so south of Atlanta, then turned eastward, sweeping in a wide circle, crossing the savannah near Augusta into South Carolina, thence arcing around north and west, cutting across the southwestern tip of North Carolina, and following the course of either the Hiwassee or the Little Tennessee to its junction with the Tennessee River below the Knoxville. Here DeSoto camped at Chiaja, a large, well-populated island in the Tennessee River, spending the better part of the month reconnoitering and using Chiaja as a base of operations. Diary entries at this point show that the climate was delightful, the meadows rich with maize and the soil covered with verdure, fattening their horses. All right, so we're gonna get the first-hand accounts of DeSoto's diaries. I have all these books, guys. You know, we've read a little bit of it in certain videos, but we didn't read it fully complete, so we're gonna definitely do that. While, sorry, while they were resting at Chiaja, the chieftain from a distant region came to call on DeSoto. On questioning him, DeSoto was told that should he travel north, he would find a rich province called Chisca, that a forge was there for copper and other metal of that color, such finer but not used due to being softer. DeSoto had heard of this province of Chisca, of which the chieftain spoke, and had been shown knives that were said to contain a mixture of gold which came from there. However, for some unexplainable reason the diaries do not disclose, DeSoto, in spite of his quest for gold in this very region, failed to follow this information. Instead, he followed the river, traveled south, leaving the river at the bend just below Chattanooga, heading west. This wide sweeping arc, starting south of Atlanta through the western parts of South and North Carolina and back to the junction of the rivers in London County, Tennessee, circles about the very heart of Appalachia. Here, DeSoto found most agreeable climate, lush with an abundance of growing things. All right, paradise here. Okay, guys, listen. We've gone over this before, but check out DeSoto's description: an agreeable climate, lush with abundance of growing things, maize, fruits, nuts, and grazing land. Here, DeSoto camped at towns situated on islands in the middle of the Tennessee River. Towns in the islands, right? This is indigenous towns in the middle of the Tennessee River, both above and below Chattanooga. Here he found town after town and province after province bearing names. They had their own names. There was towns here, guys, already. Here he found tribe after tribe cultivating land, growing agriculture. This was the thing here in the Americas. We started that. Here were buildings and temples, buildings, not just mounds. Listen, buildings and temples decorated with intricate carvings inlaid with pearls, not just mounds. Here he unknowingly passed an anciently worked gold mine at the Loniga, a mine only rediscovered by settlers in 1802, unknown to Indians then living in the area. Here once existed the most important ancient palace at Etowah, immediately north of Atlanta. Here he came to a region identified by him as Appalachia. Hey, much love and respect, Jacqueline. Thank you, appreciate it. Questions may well arise as to whether or not DeSoto knew where he was going. It would appear that he did. Although DeSoto presumably was the first European to explore this territory, ample intelligence would have been available to him, information not recorded by modern historians, but information that circulated freely amongst mariners and fishermen, not formally set down in journals, but rather passed by word of mouth or entered in such places as ship's log, a sea card, or nautical chart which seldom, if ever, found its way into any library. Other than diaries such as those of the Fidalgo of Elvas and Rangel, our only source of information telling of that vast sea of darkness comes from navigational aids, charts, and maps, which, like the Piri Reis Map, have only recently come to light. In the following chapter, we plan to examine more closely several of these nautical charts and maps showing the western Atlantic, and particularly islands, including the island of Antillia, to determine uh, if we can show, probably is what they wanted to say, early, or how early this information circulated throughout the Mediterranean, and how much of the interior might have been known to both Columbus and DeSoto before they sailed out. They knew about the southeast of America, guys, is what they're letting you know, is what they're trying to tell you. They already knew it was all there before they sailed out. How far back does the legend of the seven cities of Antillia extend? It was already a legend in time of Columbus. All right. And we go to chapter 3, Antillia. All right, 1 second, guys. Little water break again. Antillia, chapter 3. Medieval maps, and particularly nautical charts, are a fascination, picturing as they do odd bits of fact and whimsy known best to mariners. On most of these medieval charts, islands in the Atlantic, of which historians find no documentary record, have been brushed aside as being purely mythological or non existent. Three of these so called mythological islands persistently appear on early nautical charts of the Atlantic: St. Brendan or Brandini, Brazil or Brasilia or Brazil, right? High Brazil, and Antillia or Antillia, all right? And I've been telling you guys, they were just picturing parts of America and they turned it all into mythology. Brazil is pictured as a globe on all charts, green with a band of yellow encircling the middle of which the name is written. This ancient island has been symbolically perpetuated by modern Brazil in its traditional flag, which pictures the ancient island as a globe. That's where the island. Oh, all right. Did you guys hear that? You see the flag of Brazil, right? Flag of Brazil. Hold on, guys. Just real quick. All right. The island planet, huh? So let's go back. This ancient island has been symbolically perpetuated by modern Brazil in its traditional flag, which pictures the ancient island as a globe. The legend of St. Brendan is best illustrated on the Piri Reis Map, with a marvelous sense of humor. Brendan himself is shown sitting on the back of a whale in the North Atlantic, sharing his lunch with the most angelic-looking young siren. his dinghy tied to the whale, and his ship in the background, were three awe-struck monks peering over the side. No documentary record could possibly portray a legendary episode more eloquently. The island of Antillia is usually drawn on these charts as a long, narrow island distinguished by two projections at the bottom, situated far to the west and considerably larger than other islands. Perhaps the most intriguing of all ancient or medieval maps is the recently found Piri Reis Map, showing islands in the Atlantic, but more importantly, mapping a portion of the southeastern coast of North America and the entire east coast of South America, and including the Palmer Peninsula of Antarctica. This map was drawn by the distinguished geographer and Turkish, huh? Admiral Piri Reis. It turned up quite unexpectedly in the archives of the Topkapi Palace and Harem in 1929, when that sprawling complex of buildings was converted into the National Museum. This now famous map, drawn on gazelle hide in 1513, only a portion of which is presently known, contains extensive marginal notes, several of which indicate that Columbus had knowledge of the same information that Piri Reis possessed. All right, so again, that map in 1513, before they supposedly discovered Antarctica, so that shouldn't be there. Southeast of U.S., the whole East Coast shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be so precise, is what he's saying. All right, this is again a copy from an ancient map. The Piri Reis is just a copy from an ancient map, guys. It shows Antarctica without ice, land, free, animals, lakes, rivers, mountains. Hey, much love, Cyan Train. Appreciate you. Mashallah. At the time of this parchment document was found, Turkish authorities realized that it might prove to be important and consulted Professor Paul Pali, a German Orientalist, then visited Istanbul. Result of their investigation was made known in a paper presented before the 18th Congress of Orientalists held in Leiden in 1931. Following that meeting, the Society of Turkish Historical Research submitted an article to the Illustrated London News, which was published on 23 July 1932, creating wide public interest, particularly amongst geographers. However, historians doubted that Columbus had access to the earlier maps and so declined to accept the Piri Reis map. All right, so again, that would prove that Columbus knew where he was going, is what they're trying to tell you. With that pronouncement, interest terminated. Following on the heels of these discussions, World War II intervened. Oh, how convenient, right? And was not until 1956 when the map again came to the attention. This time, an officer of the Turkish Navy brought a copy to the Hydrographic Office of the United States Navy for examination and interpretation. M.I. Walters of the office, interested in ancient maps, brought the Piri Reis map to the attention of Captain Arlington Mallory, also a student of ancient maps, and together they checked its accuracy. On 26th of August 1956, Georgetown University broadcast results of their study, making available to scholars all over the world this most remarkable historical document. All right, so I got a whole video on the Piri Reis map. If you haven't seen it, or just Google the information, you'll see some versions of it. I much love and respect Platoni. Appreciate the love. Check out Platoni's presentations if you like getting the drop in the history as well. Piri Reis tells us that he compiled this map from some 20 or more earlier maps and charts dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, about 350 BC. His marginal notes and voluminous, pertinent facts scattered amongst those notes relate to Antillia and to Columbus that indicate common knowledge throughout the Mediterranean. Piri Reis places the island of Antillia on the far side of the Atlantic, where he says the sun sets, right? The sun sets in the west, in the western region. He has drawn beautiful parrots and macaws, perching on rum lines, and telling us these birds come in colors of white, red, green, and black. But more importantly, he assures us that Columbus had in his possession a book containing maps showing the western Atlantic, its coasts and islands. All right, Columbus, what? He had a book in his possession showing maps of the western Atlantic. He already knew all of this. He didn't discover anything. It was all planned, guys. His real name was Salvador Fernandez Sarco. He was Henry the Navigator's grand nephew, Portuguese Jew. He had all these maps, same as Piri Reis copied and created his map from. Its coasts and islands and noted precious stones and metals to be found there. Columbus, so Piri Reis states, after studying this book carefully, went to Genoa and explained these matters to important personages there, requesting from them both ships and money, which he failed to get. Since Piri Reis dated his map in 1513, a date contemporaneous with Columbus, and since he himself compiled his map from some 20 or more others, again, the Piri Reis is a copy of 20 other maps. Where are those 20 other maps that he made it from? Guys, understand what I'm showing? So, are saying Columbus had those same sources, same sources. That's how he navigated over here. He knew it was over here. Same sources. He ended up in the Antilles. He knew Antillia. So Piri Reis compiled his map from 20 or more others, going back to Alexander, and was himself familiar with gossip circulating around the Mediterranean. We believe his marginal notes to be factual, that Columbus likewise possessed this same information. Going back to Alexander the Great, Alexandria, the library, was it really over there in the fake Egypt, or are we talking about Alexandria, Virginia, huh? Antilles. Maps are a form of picture writing. They convey information concerning location or direction without the use of words or letters. Like other forms of picture writing, maps can be traced back into dim recesses of antiquity. Piri Reis told us his map was a compilation. Anaximander of Miletus is credited with publishing the first map of the Earth's surface sometime around 350 BC. A copy of this map in bronze was taken to Sparta. Sparta, huh? With Sparta, huh? But the king rejected it, and so became lost to history. Maps of cities rather than global predated Anaximander by 1,000 years, and more appearing in the Near East and China as early as 1500 BC. Samuel Noah Kramer recognized such a map dug up by archaeologists of the University of Pennsylvania about 1880 that faithfully laid out the ancient Sumerian city of Nippur. Dr. Kramer noted that the map of the city was accurately drawn to a scale and measurements checked in accordance with archaeological findings. Letters attached to names of city gates, the canal, the Central Park, and other features were written both in Sumerian and Akkadian Sumerian, which is in a form of Assyrian script, literally, then being a dead language. Such a bilingual map in all likelihood would have been copied from an earlier source dating probably to the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, roughly around 2500 BC, when Samaria was in common usage. Nautical charts present a totally different situation from land maps. For instance, overwater raises problems not encountered on land. On land, mileage can be stepped off and was customarily done by Roman legions, but by sea, no such stepping off is possible. Anciently, a sailor computed his position north and south by the sun or stars, but lacking a chronometer, he had no means at his disposal to reckon distance or position eastward or west. He had not fixed point to which he could turn. So I'm reminded of my navigational videos from ancient America. Check those out if you haven't. Our ancient ancestors here from the Americas taught the world how to navigate, and they had their ways to do it. Go check it out. According to Plato, the first nautical chart was made by Marinus, a Greek living in Tyre, about 100 AD. Pausanias tells us that sailors gathered at favorite places of the Diolkos, the Holocaust at Corinth, and here distance and other vital information could be exchanged and verified. Out of this welter of compiled data emerged the Greek periplos, each succeeding generation adding to existing knowledge, refining and exchanging information for to these men of the sea. This was a matter of life or death, a question of survival. As time wore on, the old periplos gradually changed into the medieval protolano, a special guide to navigation primarily between harbors, but which also included sea crossing. These portolanos were made by seamen for seamen and were utilitarian in purpose. Transition came from portolano to drafting board and a more formal map. Out of this chain of events, our modern map was born, all right? The history, supposedly, right? And coming out of Tyre or so called Greeks, where was the real ancient Tyre and what is a so called Greek? That could still be in America, guys. That's what I'm saying. Ancient navigation, right? In the early days, hey, Marion Man 4, appreciate the donation. Thank you. Much love and respect. In the early days, sketches had been made on the spot by men who themselves had been there, but from this time on, it was a draftman or cartographer who reduced to parchment sketches and information furnished him by others. Due to a draftman's lack of familiarity with distance between ports, correlation, or scale, many geographical features bore little resemblance to actuality. Size, distance, or relative scale then became largely a matter of guesswork. This guesswork proliferated as one cartographer copied from another with maps and charts of the medieval period, evolving as vicarious compilations. Original maps and charts in their entirety perhaps have never existed since ancient days. On the other hand, specific detail within each of the later maps may well have been an original contribution. Right? They're just getting it from old maps, old ancient maps. They're copying them, refined by later observation. And it is just a contribution that we wish to consider here. Specific coastline on the south of the island of Antillia, as it appears on two charts, that of Andrea Bianco of 1436. All right, we're going to look at a map from 1436 and the nautical chart of 1424. The earliest suggestion of Antillia is on a chart believed to be that of Pisigano of 1367, all right? They're mentioning the Americas, literally is what they're telling you guys. And not just the Americas, but the Southeast, Florida, all the way to the Mississippi, and the Gulf Coast, the Gulf of Mexico, all right? The East Coast. The earliest known chart to be that of, the earliest known chart showing the island and identifying it with the name Antillia is the nautical chart of 1424, the original of which is in the possession of the University of Minnesota. All right? They have the chart. Go take a look at it if you're in Minnesota, and which also may be attributed to the Pisigano family. Andrea Bianco has, to his credit, a world atlas of 1436 comprising, all right, so real quick, let me just share this thing, the whole, all right, this says plate 4 map of Andrea Bianco 1436. So here goes the Antilles right here. Let me just zoom in, guys. All right, you guys see it? Let me back up a little bit. All right. So you see that's Florida sticking out, going into Louisiana, right? The Mississippi, the East Coast. You guys see that? That's the Antilles. It's the Southeast and the East Coast going all the way up to the border, the Susquehanna River. All right? Once you see this, now we can't unsee this anymore. Let me back up again. Yeah. Yeah, we cannot unsee this anymore. All right. Go back. So the 1436 atlas comprising some seven regional charts, as well as the famous one of 1448, which in later days stirred considerable controversy. The fourth map in Bianco's World Atlas charts the North Atlantic and includes the coast of Spain, Portugal, North Africa, as well as islands in the Western Atlantic, including Antillia. This fourth map is of paramount interest, and we therefore shall trace it in minute detail. Antillia, long, narrow, and of considerable size, has a southern shore line quite distinct from that of the 1424 chart or of any map or chart. It is unique, while most other shorelines have been copied from earlier sources. The southern coast of Antillia differs radically from other coastlines, even of this same map, indicating that information conveyed to Bianco may well have come from a carefully detailed Portolano, notes and sketches of an eyewitness, one who had sufficient command and knowledge of cartography. All right, nobody's just making up a mythical island, is what he's saying in the Atlantic. This was the real coastline. Somebody actually saw the eastern coast of North America, or of the USA. Florida all the way to Mississippi, up to the Susquehanna River, the East Coast, and thus this southern segment appears to be an original contribution added to an already existing, more ancient map, and therefore not a copy. In size, comparable to Portugal, and in position westward, Antillia is shown by both Bianco and the 1424 chart, is significant, for it has no wise been confused with the Azores, as it was on the now discredited Vinland map of 1440. All right, Vinland was also here. That's what I was telling you, all these mythical places. And we got future videos coming on all this. I know a lot of people's read about Vinland and all that, and Norsemen and the mythology. We're going to get into all that, but that's very common knowledge now. But before, they were trying to say these were all fake places. All right, but instead we find it located far out to the west. Islands of the Azores appear microscopic in size by comparison, indicating that the magnitude of Antillia was believed to be considerably greater than that of an ordinary island, and was of importance. On Bianco's 1436 map, Antillia falls into a latitude about 32 degrees to 39 degrees north, roughly 55 west, a latitude and longitude much the same as the eastern portion of the United States. When we first examined Bianco's map, we were amazed at the striking similarity of the southern shore of Antillia with the Gulf Coast of the United States, from Florida to New Orleans. Possibility immediately existed that such might be the fact from Florida to New Orleans. When considered with the distance west of the Azores, the magnitude of the landmass, the latitude north and south, that this southern shore appeared to have been drawn with great sensitivity and eyewitness observation. We should like to set forth in detail the mile-by-mile study of this southern coast of Bianco's map, which was undertaken arbitrarily starting on what would be the southern coast of Antillia, corresponding to the region where Jacksonville, Florida now stands. As a matter of convenience, proceeding south from this point, hump noted by Bianco may well be the hump at Cape Canaveral, which lies south in an analogous position from Jacksonville on the Florida East Coast, continuing south to Miami and the tip of Florida, then rounding the peninsula, turning northward. This peninsula would form one of the two large projections that first led us to an identification. Again, just real quick. All right, they're talking about this map right here, this island they have in these old maps. All right, you guys see? This is here in color. Continuing south to Miami and the tip of Florida, then rounding, okay, we got that. Continuing north, Bianco shows a large bay, which from its distance north from the point and the nature of its contour strikingly resembles Tampa Bay. All right, Tampa Bay is on that. This is maps from 1300s and 1400s, before they were supposedly coming to the Americas. Right, this is the mythical Antilles, which was part of Atlantis. Literally, Antilles, Atlantis. It was part of the mythology of Atlantis, but it's literally the southeast, the eastern coast of USA, literally. All right. To the north end of this projection on the west, Bianco notes another bay having within it two smaller bays. This correlates with the double Appalachian Bay due south of Tallahassee. The Appalachian Bay, where both Narvaez and DeSoto camped. While Bianco mapped this double bay somewhat oversized, he probably derived his information from sketches made by an observer who, in keeping his notes, paid no attention to scale, and Bianco, as draftman, would therefore have been handicapped in determining any relative scale and assembling the parts from the observer's notebook sketches. Traveling westward along the coast, a small tape is shown, smaller than actual. It's undersized, again, due to the lack of, and this is the next page. Again, this is what they were talking about. Map of Antillia as drawn by Bianco. All right, Mississippi, the Atlantic coast, the Gulf of Mexico down here, Florida. All right, showing you some comparisons, and the bays and everything matches, like literally, guys. So here's a Canaveral, Miami, Tampa Bay, Appalachian Bay, Mobile Bay, Brenton, sorry, New Orleans, Mississippi River. So lacking comparative scale beyond this cape, a significant detail in mapping occurred, a detail of omission rather than of commission, for the map shows a bay with its upper end open and unconnected. This bay lies in a position analogous to that of Mobile Bay. At its northern end, Mobile Bay has two wide river mouths emptying into it with an irregular series of finger-like channels occupying the entire space between the two rivers. That the shoreline on the map had been intentionally left open is a matter not to be lightly brushed aside, for in 1436 the northern limits of the bay had not been determined by the first observer. Therefore, that line was left unconnected, a rare detail in map making that removes it from the realm of coincidence and bespeaks an eyewitness observation. Leaving Mobile Bay heading west, another large bay is shown before turning south to the tip of the second projection on the southwest. This bay appears to be Lake Borgne, coupled with Lake Pontchartrain, with the projection itself corresponding to the long spit of land fanning out south of New Orleans, forming the delta of the Mississippi River. Right, it all matches. These two projections characteristic of Antillia on all maps would thus be the Florida Peninsula and the delta of the Mississippi. Within these two projections, all features as they exist today can be found. This is the land traversed by Cabeza de Vaca and DeSoto, same one. They had the map. Remember, they went to Antillia, seeking in this very region the seven cities of Antillia, in this very place, right? Where did DeSoto and Cabeza de Vaca go? This is where they came. Both knew Appalachian Bay, and this medieval map would have been available to them. While it was this southern shoreline on Bianco's map of Antillia that instantly attracted our attention, the remainder of the boundary of the island must be understood to be the boundary of the island, to be the conjecture for definite eyewitness detail is lacking, and this portion appears to have been a copy of an older map. However, in spite of lack of detail, enough remains so that the area can be determined, and we shall follow around the boundary from the southwestern tip of the projection formed by the Mississippi Delta. The counter line turns sharply north, which, if we left the Gulf Coast at New Orleans, The turn north would proceed inland by way of the Mississippi River system. If such a watercourse by river could be followed, eventually coming out into the Atlantic, this then might well be the fabled island known in medieval times as Antillia, as known to Plato as Atlantis. Right, the western boundary of Antillia on Bianco's map runs straight north with little variation, paralleling the course of the Mississippi to present-day Cairo. All right, to present-day Cairo, huh? Just like, look at the coincidence. This is what we're telling you guys. Where's the real one? Where's the copy? Just like in Cairo, huh? A short distance from the bend at Cairo, the Ohio joins the Mississippi. And if an exploring party followed up the Ohio rather than due north up the main river, a watercourse would bring them to Pittsburgh, where the Monongahela and Allegheny join to form the Ohio. At this point, the map turns abruptly east. Due east of Pittsburgh, the Kurimeo, a tributary of the Allegheny, today connects with the West Branch or the Juanita, tributaries of the Susquehanna, over a short portage of some 2 miles immediately southwest of Altoona, locally known as Horseshoe Bend, and from there the watercourse continues down the tributary to Harrisburg, where it joins the Susquehanna, and on out into the Atlantic Ocean at Chesapeake Bay, southward from Chesapeake Bay. Now, in the Atlantic, the line bounding the island of Antillia connects with our starting point on the Florida Peninsula at Jacksonville, thus circumnavigating for some 3,000 miles the long, narrow island, which distance around Plato gave as approximate 3,000 miles over than the short portage at Horseshoe Bend. This entire waterway is navigable today by small craft, a true island as it was known anciently, unrecognized as such today. All right, guys, so this just literally made me picture what we've been learning about this region of the world, how it came out of the waters first. Remember, this was an island. The Appalachian going up to all the way to New York, up there, it was an island. Remember, this was ancient. That means there was people drawing maps back then. So now we don't have to add the whole millions of years like everybody does, but we're just telling you that this was an island at one point. There was ocean going through the plains. This had separated this part and going up to Quebec a little bit, and that river, the Great Lakes, it made this an island. I just thought of that. I'm like, wow, interesting. When modern man pushed into the interior from Chesapeake Bay, sometime late in the 17th century, and up the Susquehanna beyond Harrisburg, 2 important stone markers had been discovered, one starting near the old site of Frankstown and the other just beyond Huntington, marking the proper fork of the river at the confluence. All right, so real quick, on the previous page, they had the map again. All right, so he's Susquehanna River, the Ohio River coming in here, the Atlantic Ocean, the Mississippi, the Gulf of Mexico, Florida. Again, map of Antillia located geographically. They located it geographically. It matches perfectly. Huntingdon stands today on a site which in Revolutionary War times was known as Standing Stone. Here at this spot, an ancient stone marker once towered on a promontory. Amazed explorers described the stone as an obelisk. All right, an obelisk. 14 feet high, broad of base, tapering to 6 or 7 inches at the top, covered on all 4 sides with undecipherable letters, believed by some who first saw it to have been Egyptian hieroglyphics. And this is what I've been telling people. That obelisk they got in New York or Washington, D.C., the one in New York has hieroglyphics on it. I tell people, do you really think it came from the other side of the world, or was it always here? We might be talking about this very same obelisk. Listen, they found an obelisk with that height, with Egyptian hieroglyphics right here. It was ancient, a marker stone, a stone marker. This stone has frequently been mentioned in Pennsylvania archives. All right. Oh, we're gonna find those. We're gonna try to find those archives. The original disappeared about 1755. This is only one of great many recorded standing stones. All right, they hid this or brought it to New York, right, and said it came from Egypt. So this is the only one of great many recorded stones that earliest travelers and explorers found marking the trail from the Atlantic to the Ohio by water, a trail of standing stone markers found as far west as Lancaster, Ohio. This is deep, guys. The true old world here. This is stuff they, hid from us. This connects with everything we've been learning. Diaries of various early wanderers through this then wild region. David Seisberger, Conrad Weiser, George Grogan, Heschwelder, Gist, and Peter Kalm all faithfully testified to these standing stone markers having been there before their own time. They weren't brought from that other part of the world, talking about with Egyptian hieroglyphics. Remember, with hieroglyphics, they were there already. Here at this almost imperceptible portage near Altoona will be found the very core of our story. This was the island identified on medieval maps and charts as Antillia, Altoona. In a more ancient day, this portage was now non-existent for the two rivers, Susquehanna and Allegheny, connected the joint at Horseshoe Bend having been silted up at a later day, creating the portage as we know it today. Along the entire length of this inland waterway could be found not only an abundance of food, wild geese, turkeys, fish, nuts, berries, fresh spring water, but even more important, remember fresh spring water, fountains of youth, but even more important, a thickly settled region, all right, a thickly settled region, advanced civilization. Remember, hundreds and thousands of mounds and temples and cities and all that. Thickly settled region whose inhabitants could provide a traveler with necessarily logistics, means of travel, distance to be covered, hostile or friendly tribes that might be encountered, and main sources for food from the earliest known times along the entire length of the Mississippi and its tributaries lived one sedentary tribe after another. Here were the mound builders. Here on this great island, all right, on this great island of Antilles, Atlantis island lived the prehistoric Muskogean family, a group which excelled in agriculture and handcrafts. Their territory comprised the entire region as we have just bounded it. Here, carbon 14 dates go back to the Christian era, as early as 12,000 BC, with a large proportion falling around 2000, 1000 BC. That's the hijack with all their numbers and carbon datings. Here, any exploring party of the 16th century AD would have found historic tribes of Indians, Creek, Cherokee, Seminole, Choctaw living along the entire course of this inland waterway. Earlier, we noted that Antillia was also called the Island of the Seven Cities. We carry knowledge of Antillia back to 1424 to 1367 through charts of Bianco and the Pisigano family. As we proceed back in time from Columbus and DeSoto, we should like to call attention to the Martin Behaim globe of 1492, which will be discussed in the following chapter. This globe steps our knowledge of the seven cities back some 700 years, roughly to 734 AD, linking the fabled island of Antillia to the legend of the seven cities. All right, and that's the end of chapter 3. And we're gonna probably leave it off right there, guys, just so we don't make these videos too long. And we're gonna definitely continue reading this book. I hope you guys found it very, very insightful, interesting. Even if you don't believe it, at least entertaining. But the burden of proof is on you. I mean, we got so much other correlation that matches this, that would make this, yes, part of the great empire of Atlantis. Hey, possibly the center. As they're saying here, the island, the original island or after the cataclysms happened, or the world, the land separated or whatever. But anyways, um, yeah, very interesting, huh, guys? Let's see what we can find here for the dismount. For the dismount. So we're gonna leave with this song from Netflix, or an instrumental from Netflix, and it's called "Built to Last," which matches the theme of today. We built to last. The Americas, our people, our culture, our history, built to last. It's more than just fables and stories and stories from Greeks and so-called Egyptians. It's bigger than that. Don't get stuck on the whole messenger. Don't get stuck on the messengers and the created tags and these created people and these characters. They've just been talking about the Americas the whole time. All right? They've just been talking about the Americas the whole time. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks to everybody who donated. Thanks to everybody that came through and showed some love. Thanks to all my moderators, everybody that's supporting, all the Patreons. Appreciate you guys for holding me up, as always. Shout out to the Telegram crew, the back chat. Shout out to all the peoples that we deal with, all the genealogy sessions I've had. Shout out to you. Hope you guys are still doing some more work and finding more things. Appreciate everybody. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.